This is Growth Guide, a podcast exploring the depths of curiosity, questioning everything in the name of growth. I'm your host, Brian D'Alessandro. My guest this week is Frank the Legend Shamrock, retired four-time undefeated UFC Middleweight Champion. Frank pioneered the sport as one of the first to successfully mix various disciplines. During his reign, he was the number one ranked pound-for-pound UFC fighter in the world. But all of this is just a tiny part of his story. Frank's journey is nothing short of unbelievable. After leaving an abusive home at the age of 12, he lived on the streets, repeatedly landing himself in prison. One day, he had the epiphany that he was on a losing path and decided to turn around his life. In prison, he committed himself to developing his mind, body, and spirit. He put himself through college, organized a weight training program, and when he got out, he channeled all of his energy into becoming the UFC champion. Never stopping on this path of growth, Frank lives by the Warrior's Code. Since retiring, he thrives as an entrepreneur, mentoring the youth, and motivating Fortune 500 companies as a public speaker. Frank has also journeyed down the road of reflection and healing, bringing peace to himself and his family. A devout single father that I've seen in action, Frank works around the clock to consciously give his daughter the best life that he can. Frank, man, so thrilled to be here with you today. Glad we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, it's nice to be here.
Yeah, man. So how's everything going?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, I retired now. It's been, I think, almost 11 years. So I've been having this just wonderful father-daughter experience where I'm home every day and I get to experience all these things that most dads that work, like, they don't get to experience that stuff. So in one way I was like, hey, all dads are experiencing this. But on the other way I was like, oh man, like, people aren't working. This is, it's got to be a challenge for people. I'm real blessed that my businesses, they run themselves. Like, I don't have to really do much but show up once in a while. And but yeah, the time with my daughter has just been fantastic. And, I live out here in the country, and it's like beautiful. You hike every day and ride bikes, and so it was definitely a blessing.
Yeah, so it's been 11 years since you've retired from the MMA world. You've had an illustrious career, obviously. How was that for you, shifting out of that world, and did you experience kind of that death of ego and identity as you were transitioning into what was next?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had a pretty normal experience for, like, professional athletes, because you commit your whole life to something. You're so focused. Literally your life revolves around performance and what you're doing, and sort of this goal. I just didn't know. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. Like, all my goals had been accomplished. All my dreams, everything I kind of set out to do was done. And then all of a sudden, I really had nothing to do. And it wasn't, I know a lot of athletes go through, struggling with, who they are. Like, I knew who I was. I just didn't know what to do. Like, I literally
I have all this energy. Where do I put it?
I had no idea what to do with all my time. So that was the big, like, wake up call for me. Like, I really had to dig into, like, who I was and what my purpose was, and what, the things that inspired me to do the things I did. I had to sort of identify what those were, and then kind of bring that purpose into the forefront. Because, besides being a dad, which is like my core, I'm sure my core reason for being here, it's like, what do I do with my energy and my resources and my fame and all that other stuff. And, luckily I leaned into the charity work, and, our family charity, we did some amazing things, we have for the past decade. So that was like a big, it was a big guider for me.
All right, so let's go back to that. Stepping into your role as father, a single parent, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the family. So you had a lot of this time. You had this desire to put it into something. So how has your journey as a fighter played into your approach to parenting?
Wow, that's actually a really good question. Well, I taught martial arts for like 20 years, and when you become like a guider of children, albeit, surrogate, you kind of see results of things. So, I would see parents that pushed too hard, or children that didn't want to be there, or children that weren't, supported, or, didn't have encouragement. And so I became that, intermediary guy. And, excuse me. And so when I had my daughter, I was like, I want to fill all those roles. Like that's something that's really valuable to me. Um, and so I just was conscious of it. And I think a lot of people aren't conscious, because they're so busy and they're doing this and they got extra kids and they got, there's life in the way. And I didn't really have life in the way because my career was done, everything was done, and I had all this time. So, I just really committed to being a present father. And I had identified some of the issues that I saw from other children, and I tried to fill those gaps, as a parent myself. And then because, I had this great career and I had all these life lessons, both in self-defense and business and, community. Like I really felt like there was a way to teach and share information that wasn't confusing. And so I made up these games and, we told stories, and my daughter thought all the stories were, Dad's like they were just made up. And she didn't realize until she was about 9 or 10 when the boys at school started, the dads would tell the boys would tell Nick, my daughter, and she'd be like, Dad, is this true? And I'd be like, yeah, it's true. She's like, I thought they were just stories. But it's in that storytelling that there's a life lesson. And so I would, was very conscious about that. And, that's just a gift. Like most people don't have time to even think about that or have, enough life experiences to be in a position to, teach that way. So yeah, and now like for the first time, she did martial arts when she was little, she did karate, she did all these things, but she was just doing it because it was cool and it was fun, it was interesting. And as soon as other stuff came along that was more interesting, she moved on. But now, a couple of weeks ago was the first time she's like, Dad, I really like this martial arts idea, and I want to get back into training. And so it was a big moment for me.
Yeah, that must be a pretty wild, full circle journey.
Yeah.
And do you have mixed feelings on it, or is it all just...
No, I mean, I think, it's like anything. You could be, you can love to ski, or you can be a downhill extreme skier. Like, you take it where you want to go with it. I wouldn't encourage her to be a fighter because it's a really hard, challenging life, risky. But definitely encourage her to train in martial arts. Like, I think, for me, it was a life changer. I was a messed up kid emotionally. I had no community support, no structure, no family.
Yeah, you had a wild...
Yeah, I lived on the streets. I was like a criminal. And it was really through martial arts training and the discipline and the community and the support and the guidance and the purpose. Like the principles of martial art changed who I am as a human being. So I always recommend, do martial arts.
And would you say that it changed you to be someone else, or did it bring you back to your true essence?
Yeah, I just think it brought out what I could be. Because the things I was lacking was, I didn't have good parenting. I didn't have good, social support. I had all these issues because of abuse, and I had all these different problems that were a symptom of the things that were happening to me. If you took those things away, I wouldn't have, odds are I wouldn't have had so many problems. But it was, building my body up, gaining confidence through that, learning, constantly learning as part of, a martial arts idea. Something I still do. I was watching a documentary before you came over because to me it's fascinating. It's black holes and we're figuring it out.
Oh yeah. Which documentary was it?
Black Holes. Where Are We Now? I think it was.
Did you see the other one? I think it's called Black Hole Earth by Nassim Haramein.
Oh, I haven't seen that one.
I'll send you it. It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, I was, because just when you're in martial arts, you wake up every day and you're like, oh, how do I learn to be better? And how do I learn to be better at this? And how does this apply? And so it creates this sort of mindset of constantly growing, personally developing, and something I didn't have that in my life. It was like survive, don't get in trouble, don't get arrested.
Well, and that's one of the things. I mean, when you look at the different forms of leadership, when you're in survival state, even looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you can't be concerning yourselves with these higher, more evolved way of looking at things. You're fighting for survival. And so just opening up into that next space where you have the ability, the cognitive ability, because the brain won't even be able to access, creativity or empathy or compassion when you're in survival state. So just that gift of opening up. And I mean, you seem to have broken through some serious patterns for the next generation. That's something I think about a lot with my son, and just the lineage of of stuff we inherit,
Right.
whether it be in the genes or in the stories or in the experience and environment. But they're not easy patterns to break.
Yeah. No, agreed. That's one of the things I'm most proud of is, changing how things were and having a new generation that doesn't know all that stuff. To her, they're these great stories, and Dad's this great guy, and
But stories, I mean,
Yeah.
the two things that you hit on, and we've covered this in a number of episodes already. Storytelling
Yeah.
is just innate to human beings, and a way to connect that is just so powerful. And using play or fun or humor as a way to get it across, I mean, it's just so powerful because it breaks down any of the other barriers that could be getting in the way.
Yeah, it's so true. And then I would say the biggest, besides developing the mind, body, and the spirit, the biggest thing I got from it was, I grew up on the streets. I left home when I was 11, so I didn't really have a connection with my family. And that made it hard for me to have connections with other people, deep relationships, trust, love. And I was like that until I was 21, until I got out of prison. So I didn't have connections with people. And then it was through martial arts training that I started developing these connections and learning to communicate and share and, trade, work with people. And that's one of the things I credit the most is, I learned to be a good human, to be a good person, to be a good friend, to be a good partner through those, martial arts relationships.
Were there any key relationships or experiences that you see as defining?
Mine were always through coaching, because I didn't know how to fight. I was scared of fighting. I grew up in a home of abuse, so fighting and violence was, it was frightening. It wasn't exciting to me.
Right.
It wasn't like something I was running towards. I was always running away from it. So overcoming that took a lot, for me to sort of say, okay, I'm gonna do this. This is the thing. And then, as the universe works, people would show up. They'd be like, oh, I love your passion. I love what you're doing. Can I help you? And that's the same as, when I was a troubled youth and, Bob Shamrock adopted me and other people tried to help me. They'd be like, wow, you seem like a good kid and you just need a little help. So it was really coaches that had the biggest influence on me because, they could see my potential or they could see my passion and they would stop their journey and be like, well, let me help you. Here's what I know. Here's what I know. And so, those people were Maurice Smith, who became the UFC Heavyweight Champion, and Javier Mendez, Tony DiMaria, just Eric Deuce, people that were like, yeah, I like that. Let me let me lean in and help you. And that to me is that's what to me that's what love and humanity is about. Because I do the same thing now when I mentor youth or I speak at institutions. If you raise your hand, you're like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I need some help. I'm like, well, let's help you. How can we, gather resources? What can we do? How do we encourage you? So yeah, that's the coaches did the most for me.
That intergenerational aspect of it too, I think, is so important because in a lot of our culture and society, we've lost touch with it. We either don't have time for it or we're just disconnected. We don't have the systems that still foster it. What I have experienced is there's just such a value that's on both sides of it. The younger kid who's getting guidance from someone who has experienced it, and then the person who's experienced it being able to give back, it feeds them in a different way, and it's kind of removes the construct of linear time. You know what I mean? We so often think all right, you're young, you just get old, and it's that track. But I feel like when you're communing with intergenerational, time ceases to exist in a weird way. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. Well, it reminds me of one of our Warriors Code principles. We call it the plus minus equals system. And what that means is if you want to accomplish anything, you find your plus. And then, you present yourself, you're in a good position, you're righteous, you're doing the work. And that plus will almost always be like, oh, let me help you. And then, the model is once you have your plus, then you go find your equals and you find out what they're doing. And then you develop a community with them. And then you hang out with them. And then so you can better yourself. And, whether it's you're competing or you're helping or you're working together. And then the final component is the minus. Then you go find somebody who needs the information and you pass it on to them. And just like that simple equation, you can solve pretty much anything in the world because, you got to be humble to approach a plus. You got to be ready. You got to be willing. You got to be moldable. You have to have, a good heart, a good open heart. Otherwise, I'll be like, no, get your shit together and come back and call me. So there's it's very much a human component there that really excels development, like in everything. I use it for everything that I do. And what really, like, we're talking about the human thing. I was sitting in the airport yesterday. My flight was delayed. Everyone's angry and frustrated, and we're just sitting there for hours. And out of the corner of my eye, I see this blind guy walk up, and he looks like he's looking for a seat. And so my first thought is, I'm going to give him my seat. Like, my bags are here, and I'm going to stand up and give him my seat. And before I can, the guy to my right, who's like old, I mean, he was old. He hops up and he walks over. He's like, hey, can I help you? And they get into this conversation, and I think he was looking for water or something. So they eventually walk off. And I see the guy, and the old guy's crooked, and he's like limping, and he's just barely moving. But he saw the same thing I saw. And before I could act, he was like, no, that's not right. This guy needs some help. And it was just this really, simple human interaction. And all I could think of was, man, I should have got up first. Like, what was I? Like, why did I pause? I was like, oh, well, maybe he doesn't need help. Well, he's a blind guy. Of course he needs some help. But it was really powerful that this guy saw it. He looked at his wife, and his wife like nodded her head, and he jumped up, jumped right on it. But that's how things have always worked for me. People were like, wow, he has a good heart. He's really trying. We should help him. And for me, it's been total strangers. From when I was a kid, until even now.
Yeah, it's a powerful program to have running, where you look for those opportunities and situations. Because I do think that's something that's usually taught, where you learn that kind of like, I remember when I was a kid, anything I was stuck in within the confines of my reality from my home and upbringing, when I experienced or witnessed someone who showed me another way, it was the most powerful thing. And to this day it is, because it takes what seems impossible and makes it possible. But I love your follow through on that, of creating action and a clear path on how you follow through that.
Yeah, it's been. I've used it for everything: relationships, understanding things, and all of my success came from realizing I was a knucklehead and on the wrong path, and then just finding mentors. And I present my case, and some say no. They're like, no,
Isn't
you're
it
not
wild
ready.
how many people are just willing to talk and to help out?
Totally.
I found that too, and especially nowadays, I think it's important for the younger kids to realize, because we have access to anyone and everyone. They're not all going to respond, but we know how to get to them and to reach out, and so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. Well, when I was in the Bay Area, I was visiting one of my oldest friends, and so I had lunch with my business partner. He says, so I'm visiting Ann. He's like, Ann, I don't remember Ann. And I said, oh, from Google. Ann's my friend from Google. She used to be with Palm. And he's like, how did you meet her? And I realized I'd never told him the story. So I live in the Bay Area. I'm fighting. I have a Palm phone. This is back when Palm was, a leader in the space. And my phone breaks. And so I'm like, well, I need a phone. I'm training. And so I just go online, and I find that the Palm headquarters is right down the street. So I drive over there, not knowing it's the corporate headquarters. They don't sell phones there. There's nothing to do with phones. And I knock on the door. And somebody answers. She's like, can I help you? I'm like, yeah, my phone's broke. She's like, we don't do that. This is like a corporate thing. I said, yeah, I'm a customer. My phone is broke. And so
The magic word, customer.
So she's like, oh, I got to solve this. So she goes in, calls a bunch of people, and downstairs walks this little tiny woman named Ann. Turns out Ann is a huge fan of fitness and was a bodybuilder and a mixed martial arts fan. So she hears the name Frank Shamrock. She's like, oh my gosh, I'll go down and help him. So that began a 20-year friendship, where now I work for, large corporations because of her, friendship. She's like, no, Frank will do it. Like, bring Frank in. He's like, he always accomplishes his dreams and his things. But I was telling that story, and I was like, he's like, well, what made you think that they did phones? And I'm like, well, it's Palm. Like, no one told me that they didn't do phones. So, until someone says, yeah, they don't do phones, like, I'm going to show up, knock on the door, and be like, hey, I need your help.
It's kind of a good example of, like, just because you don't understand how it all works, don't let that stop you from moving forward.
Doesn't really matter.
And sometimes it works in your favor, because when how many things have you done where if you knew what it was going to entail, you would have been like, screw that. I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
but
that's true. Well, I found my wrestling coach, Eric Deuce, who was my coach for my entire career, because I'd moved to the Bay Area. I'm fighting Kevin Jackson, undefeated Olympic gold medalist. Like, he hasn't lost a wrestling match in, a decade. And he's like the best wrestler on the planet. And only 2 guys had ever beaten him. And one of them just happened to live like 7 or 8 miles from my house. So I literally call the guy on the phone, say, hey. He's like, well, who are you again? I said, well, I see here you beat Kevin Jackson, and I'm going to fight him. And he's like, oh, Kevin, he's a great wrestler. I showed up at his place and been training with him ever since, till the day I retired. And we have a wonderful friendship. But I was like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. This guy beat him. I'm going to fight him. He probably knows something I don't know.
Did you always have that natural ability to say, oh, you know what, that needs a solution? I'm going to go and try that.
Yeah, I just think very mechanically and logically about things. And I think a lot of that was, I'd gotten so much trouble when I was young. I was just this emotional wreck. And then, when I really came to, I was in prison. I was sitting in prison. And what made the biggest impact to me, was I couldn't be there for my son. And then every prison I went to, there was guys on the yard that I knew. They're like, hey, Frank, how's it going? And my mind was like, wow, if you keep doing this is what your life is going to become. And that was not my dream. And so, I kind of had this like realization, like, wow, everything they told me is right. Like, they're not just trying to scare me. Like, I'm a screw up. And so I started thinking, like, well, how do I get out of this? Like, how do I fix this? And so the first thing was I went to school, I went to college in prison, I got educated. I trained every day. I started training people. I had like a little group that I would lead, and I would study bodybuilding, and then I would teach them. And so it just became this process of, well, this is my goal. I want to become a professional athlete. I want to become a champion. And I have nothing. Like, I'm in prison. But I was, studious. I could learn things. I could figure things out. And then I had people to practice on. I had my weightlifting crew. So I'd be like, let's try this and let's try that. And so I kind of built this process of, just logically conquering, like going through things. And I think, me not knowing that there was barriers to my, or that there was barriers out there for me, that's what I think didn't stop me, because it seemed perfectly like logical. Like, yeah, that makes sense. New sport, no one knows anything. It's like, well, I could probably conquer it.
and you did, right? I mean, entering into the world of MMA, which didn't even really exist at the time. Can we give context for listeners who are, used to the modern UFC world? How was it different back when you started?
It was just, beginning. It was really dedicated martial artists and some athletes and tough guys that were in this fighting arena. But there wasn't a sport yet. It hadn't really been developed. There was no systems. And it was perfect for me because, I just came out of prison. I got this, scholastic type attitude. I was like, oh, I got to learn things. And then because of the personal, the training and all the weightlifting and sort of the leadership position that I took when I was in prison, like, I was like, oh yeah, you learn it, study it, and you go and apply it. And if it doesn't work, you change it up and you try it again. And, and that was an approach that didn't exist in the sport. It was tough guys, it was street fighters, it was former athlete guys.
People who already had credentials,
they were using their strengths, to compete. And I didn't have any strengths. I didn't know anything. I'd never had any of that stuff. So the challenge for me was figuring out what was real, what worked, what was valid. And I was always a martial arts fan. So I understood like Bruce Lee's principles of, use what works and, get rid of what doesn't and be like water. And so I just kind of took, the traditional idea of learning and martial arts application, and I applied it to this, sport. But I was the only guy with a notebook. Back in the day, it'd be me, a bunch of tough guys, and my notebook, and everyone would beat me up because they'd be like, what's this guy doing a notebook? And, it was like an affront to the culture. But within a very short period of time, like, I was figuring it out, because the human body hasn't changed in, 100,000 plus years. So it's not like we're getting any different, it just works the same every single time. So yeah, as I just studied and learned, and one of the things that really helped me was I grew up on the streets, so I could read people. You know, I could tell if you were being truthful. I could tell if knew what you were talking about, if you were passionate about it, if it was real. And when I would ask questions, you know, this is a time when you didn't really ask questions, you just did what you were told. When I would ask a question, I could tell they didn't know the answer. And so that would make me go, this is my coach, my leader. He doesn't really know the answer. And so I would go search for the answer.
And that was the time where I remember back then all of these different styles of martial arts were testing themselves against different styles. It wasn't like clear like exactly what the most effective styles were yet, right?
Yeah, nobody knew. Everyone was bringing their style into this rule set and trying to, you know, make it work, basically. But nobody had created a style to work in the rule set.
So do you think that all played in your favor, your interest in problem solving and almost
Totally.
puzzles? Are you a big puzzle guy?
Yeah, love puzzles.
Yeah.
I love logic puzzles. Yeah, to me, it was just a giant puzzle. And the components were the human body and then this rule set. And I could tell the advantage I had. It's like, you know, by then, I mean, I spent 3.5 years in prison lifting weights. Like, I was a monster. I was very strong. I was very smart. You know, I could tell the difference in smartness, you know, just because of retention. You know, after 3 or 4 months of training, I was like, I could really do this. Like, I get it.
It clicked for you at some point where you were
like, I get
like,
that people don't know. And that was like, you know, I think it's like when you discover something new, right? And you're like, people don't know this. This is amazing. I could tell that there was something there, and I could probably figure it out. And that was one of the big boosters in my first, you know, probably the first booster of my career. I remember vividly, after like 3 or 4 months, I choked my first professional fighter. You know, got him in a choke and I made him tap. And I was like, whoa, like there's the result from all this stuff. And then, yeah, but, you know, fighting is incredibly simple. That's what's amazing about it. You know, people complicate it, but it's actually really, really simple. Body's simple, biomechanics are simple. You know, you can only take so much damage. Brain's very simple in what it can take. So it wasn't hard to figure out like what the mechanics or needs were. It was just hard to get the information out of people, apply it, you know, practically without getting hurt, and then, you know, work your way up.
we originally connected around the cannabis space, talking about CBD and its, ability to heal and to really help with inflammation. You seem to have discovered somewhere along the way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you used ice and cannabis for your healing regimen. Can you talk about that and also your approach? Because it seems you're so methodical with. Did you focus on your recovery as much as the training?
Yeah. Well, it's something people laugh at because I still take a nap every day at noon because I'm like, oh, I'm tired. And because I would sleep after my first session to reboot my body, eat, rest, hydrate, ice, sleep. My mom was just very like natural food, kind of hippie type woman. And so, she didn't, we never took pills. We never took aspirins. Like we never took anything. And so as I grew up, I was like, I don't really need that stuff. I really want to, be in touch with my body. And then as soon as I started training, it was just, it was 100 times what hard weightlifting was. You would just be in massive pain and discomfort, and you'd have all these, irregularities and imbalances in your body. And so I started looking for a way to like get rid of that because I was like, this is terrible. And that's what really got me into cannabis. Like I was like, because I would, smoke some and I'd be just totally relaxed and no pain and no issues. And so that became, a daily regimen. Like I smoked every single day until, 3 weeks before my fight. And then, when I was 16, my right leg went numb because I was playing basketball. And when I went to the doctor, he's like, well, you got this thing called a spondy, and you've basically broken one of the vertebrae on your spine, like the little arm. You're going to have pain and instability for the rest of your life. I was like, no way. I was like, well, I got this dream of being a professional athlete. And he's like, yeah, it's not going to happen. You're never going to play contact sports. That's what he told me. And so I had this group home guy, and he was a big hippie naturalist guy. And he's like, don't listen to him. I'm taking this chiropractor. And, they kind of developed treatment for me. It's like, stay flexible, keep your hamstrings flexible. And then if you have real pain, don't take pills, go on ice. And so the ice originally was just to stop the spasms and inflammation that would happen if I would twist too much or have too much impact. But then when I started fighting, like that pain would get really high. It would just be, can't do anything pain. You'd just be sitting there, my low back would be pulsing and stuff. And so So I just started using ice. And it was like a daily thing, train in the morning, come home, hydrate, eat, meditate, stretch a little bit, lay on ice, take a nap, wake up, hydrate, eat, stretch a little bit, and then, hang out with people for a little bit and then train in the evening again. But yeah, I mean, I took no painkillers, no aspirins, none of that stuff, nothing but cannabis and ice and rest. And I think, probably the thing missing from most people in their recovery is the rest. You can't imagine how much rest you need if you're doing 5 or 6 hours of physical activity a day. Like, you really need to, let your body reset, let your body regenerate. And if you don't, the machine will wear out quickly.
And how do you gauge that? Was it just listening to your body, mind-body awareness?
Just listening, and what I had going for me is I never got into pills, or, I tried them and it's like, whoa, that's terrible. I feel, my whole body feels, weighted and tired. And so once I realized, like, I didn't want to do that, it's just a matter of being in touch with your body. Because I'd go in and for training sessions, I'd warm up, I'd get all ready, and then I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't feel good. I'm gonna go home. And my coach is like, what are you doing? I'm like, no, it doesn't feel, I'm not sharp. And that's when you get hurt. That's when you get injured. That's when you have problems or you learn bad techniques.
That's really fluid, though, to be able to, when you have such drive and determination to be reaching a goal, to be able to say, okay, this is not a time to push, right? Is that something you have any tricks for, of like knowing when to push, or even in life, when to fight for something versus when to just go the other way?
Well, I know for the body, like, your body is literally just a machine. And mine's like a sports car. Like, I'm like a Ferrari. So, you got to warm it up. You can't just blast it out the gate. And if you run too long, it's going to get hot, and it needs breaks. And so for me, I just started thinking of my body like a machine. So when I get in and I warm everything up, if it's still not running good, then I take it out and I tune on it. And the tuning for me is, what do we need? Some more electrolytes, some more rest, a hot tub, like, what do we need here? It took a long time to get there, because when you're young, you don't feel, like, I didn't feel as much. I didn't have any pains, I never got hurt.
My recovery is so fast.
Yeah, I would just sleep for a little bit. I got thrown one time in Dallas, Texas. I was wrestling with this state champion wrestler, and I was never a good wrestler. But I was getting ready to fight Igor Zinoviev, and I was trying to learn wrestling. And I grab his head, he scoops under, throws me on my shoulder, like dislocates my shoulder. And I'm laying there in pain. And this is the funny part, he gets up and he's like, oh my God, I'm late for school. I got to bounce. And so he like runs off to go back to high school. And I'm laying, I can't even move. I'm in pain. My shoulder's all popped out. And I'm in my buddy's office and I'm laying there. And I'm like, what do I do? Like, I'm jacked up. And so I kind of move my shoulder around. It sort of pops back in. And I go, oh, I'm just going to sleep. And so I slept under this desk for an hour. When I woke up, I was like, okay, my shoulder hurts, but I'm actually okay. So there's like, you get in touch with your body when you're not polluting it. Like, when you're not, when you're resting it properly, when you're, when you have a regimen of recovery that's really strict. Most people don't take a nap every day, and I still do, because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm feeling a little tired here. I'm gonna lay down and rest. But I've trained my body to go, hey, we're tired, let's rest. Like, don't keep pushing. And then when it comes to, like, performance or doing things now, like, I don't need to rest. My mind will carry me through that because I'm not pressing my body. My body's not like, oh, we're gonna give out. So, I could not sleep for 24 hours with not coffee or anything, because I can just turn my brain on. And, that's what I tell people. It's like, when you're passionate about something and you really, are pursuing a goal, you got to take care of the machine, but you can push the limits of your mind, of your creativity, of your, like, all that stuff can definitely be pushed and should be, because that's where you'll find, both common people and breakthroughs. And, that's where you'll find even inspiration for me. I get inspired in the middle of the night.
Yeah, but we can only really tap into that if we have that solid foundation, totally. Right? And that balance.
Yeah. And that's what, and it always goes back to martial arts for me. But that's what martial arts, does for me, and why I recommend it for the people is, when you're training your body, what's going on with it. You're in touch. When you're, when you're working with other people, you're connected, so it's a chance to share and intertwine feelings, emotions, ideas, and stuff like that. And then that's what really, bolsters your spirit, right? Because you leave those sessions, you're like, oh man, it was great. I'm learning and I'm on, and then you're opened up, yeah.
Did you find that you started feeding and thriving on that connection with people? Because you said how
Totally.
it just didn't exist.
Yeah, and I didn't know I didn't have it. Like, I didn't know why I didn't have deep relationships and stuff. It was all from my childhood and like the things that happened to me. But, I'm surviving. I'm on my course. I'm training. I'm fighting. So I didn't realize that it was so valuable to my spirit. And then those people would become my community around the world. Like, those are my friends. Those are my, those are people I still hang out with to this day. And now their kids are growing. And so, it's given me what I lost or lacked when I was a child. We never played at the neighbor's house. We never had sleepovers. Like, we never did that social stuff that makes you, intertwined in a social fabric. So I got mine later. I got mine in my 20s. And it was like the most powerful experience ever because I didn't know I didn't have it. And then once I did, I was like, oh man, like this feels so good. Like, I want to go hang out. I want to, I want to help them move. Like, I want to do all those things that, are the connective tissue.
And I just can't help but think what a gift that is to your daughter to, for her not to experience it and not know it.
Yeah, she'll never know because to her it's
right.
commonplace. And, when she was, from the time she was like 2 or 3, I lived in the Bay Area. I was very famous in the Bay Area for bringing mixed martial arts there and fighting at the arena. And so fans would stop me everywhere. Oh, Mr. Shamrock, oh, can I take a picture of you? Well, she didn't know why they were taking a picture. So I'd always include her. Of course, yes, my daughter Nick. And we'd all take a picture. And then I was like, oh, Nick. And I would, shake their hand and be like, what's your name? And I would, ask her a few questions and have a personal connection. So she saw that. And so, by the time she was like 3, she's like, hi, I'm Nicolette. And she would like share some personal connections things. Amazing. And it was so powerful because people would be like, wow, your daughter's amazing. Well, she just saw what I was doing and then was like, oh, that's exactly what you do. And so a couple of weeks ago, she was I heard her over telling her girlfriend, because her girlfriend was really shy. And she's like, yeah, I'm really shy. Da, 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 da. And she's like, how do you do it? You're so out there and you're so gregarious and you're so much fun. She's like, well, my dad taught me, to shake people's hands and look them in the eye and tell them a little something, ask them a few questions, introduce yourself. She goes, I used to think it was silly. And when I was a kid, I said, well, why am I doing this? She's like, now I get it. Like, because she'll walk, oh, hi, I'm Nick, how you doing? Just spark with a total stranger. Like, she'll just break into
it's so interesting, right? Because she took the best parts of fame, right? The truest, most connected parts of them, and she applied them without needing to have any of it, just by being herself and
it's so
opening
it's so cool. Like, it's just and she'll meet people I don't know. She'll be, hey Dad, come meet so and so. I'll be like, oh wait, nice to meet you.
That's really inspiring. Just having permission to just like connect with anyone and everyone.
Yeah. And then because I taught children self-defense, I also realized sometimes we do our kids a disservice when we tell them things like stranger danger, because we're teaching them conflicting messages. Oh, present yourself, introduce yourself, but don't talk to people you don't know. It's like, well, how are you going to ever meet people? And so when my daughter was young, I was like, well, how do we deal with this? Because this is like a real thing.
I'm grappling with that, even with a 3.5-year-old. Like
how do I understand this? So, when I boiled it down to, hey, what's the most logical thing? I created a series of fun games for her to understand situations that weren't good. So instead of making it scary, oh, this is scary, don't let that happen, and then they freeze up because they don't have any training or skills or understanding, I turned it into a bunch of games. So there's one where someone grabs your wrist and you do unlock your wrist. There's one where you're sitting on a bench and someone grabs your leg, and so I would literally, Nick, go sit on the bench. You'd sit on the bench like, I'm going to sneak up and grab your leg. And she'd be like, oh, okay. And we turn it into this game where now she thinks it's fun and funny. But at the same time, like, she's fully aware, prepared. If someone were to grab her leg, or so, she's like, Dad, I'm never going into a van. Like, what are you talking about? That's the most unsafe thing ever. And then one of the key things we taught her, which was like martial arts, and also like, because she's a girl, like self-awareness, which was, if someone's in arm reach of you, they can get you, they can hurt you, they can grab you, they can wrestle you, they can tickle you, they can do whatever. And it's never okay unless it's them, or it's your permission, or you're saying, hey, let's wrestle, let's tickle, let's grab each other, like let's, whatever. I go, it's never okay, because your body has all this value, it's a perfect machine. And so she's like, oh, okay. Now that she's a young woman and boys are like trying to get close to her, she's like, hey, yeah, why don't you just stay an arm's length away?
It's powerful.
I mean, it's cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how the teen years go.
I know. I was saying to my wife, I was like, I feel bad for any of her boyfriends that she brings home.
Well, so I started telling her this story when she was like 8, because I was like, wow, she's going to be like a woman soon. And that was, it was also a conversation about like sexuality and, being connected. And it's you're a woman, you make decisions. But there's one caveat, when you get to dating age, I'm actually going to open up a martial arts school, and I'm not going to do anything in it, but it's going to have all my pictures, my posters, my trophies, and then videos of me like crushing people, and I'll be in the back where your boyfriends can walk through, or your girlfriends can walk through and meet me.
There's going to be a long hallway.
She's like, no, Dad, no. Now that she's 13, I'm actually looking at martial arts studios. So
nice. Hilarious. Yeah, it's, man, parenting is a wild journey.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun, though. And I just feel so bad. And this is why one of the things I think the pandemic has done, which is open a lot of people's eyes, because it's the first time we've been there, they've been there, you've had all this time. So I think a lot of people are rethinking, their job, their purpose, their commitment to that, like, and looking for other ways to make money, and looking for other ways to, support the life they want to live. Because after this experience, you're like, I don't want to sit in an office for 8 hours a day and drive an hour, and it's like,
and they've just experienced it and saw that, wait, crazy. I could do this remotely.
And the kids don't want to do that, lose their parent like that. So that's what's so challenging about, our society, and why I love entrepreneurism, because I just think, people ask me like, oh, well, how'd you get into, entrepreneurism? I was like, well, I had no money, and I have 23 felonies, so it's not like I can ever get a job at anything, so I needed to make money to support my family. And, I chose a very difficult path, but there's a million opportunities to make money. There's more money you could ever make. You just got to think differently and be creative and be persistent and, decide really what you want to do, with your time and with your life.
Yeah, and how you want to that's the beauty, I think, of being an entrepreneur, is you really get to design your own life. And very few people could say that. They take a victim mindset of having to work and the life that they're, stuck in, and this is like such a common story. And we all have the ability to change that.
Oh, yeah.
It's scary as all hell, and it goes against those deep fears we might have within, or these deep programs of how it's supposed to be. But it's there, and I think that's one of the things that this pandemic has shown people.
Yeah.
Is, look, we're like, we just had pause. We had halftime, right? And we just saw really clearly all the things that haven't been working. We tried out some new things. Now, how do we want to rebuild? Because the people who are saying, oh, I want to go back to normal or how it was, I mean, A, that doesn't exist, and B, if that's what you want, then that's where you're going to be stuck. But for anyone who's seen behind the curtain now, there's the opportunity. And it's just a matter of asking the question, all right, how am I going to create that version of it?
Yeah.
But that's...
I love it. I mean, I think I do a lot of coaching for entrepreneurs. My new thing, which happened organically, is I do a lot of exiting. So people will be like, hey, been with Google for 10 years. I think I'm done with it. And I'm like, oh, well, what are you going to do next? They're like, I have no idea. I've got some money. I got all these skills. And so, I'm helping them build businesses to move over and do what they want to do. Because, they're done of the grind. Like, they're like, I can't do it anymore. It's exhausting. And, you think about a place like Google or Amazon, super high performers, functioning at the highest level in these extreme stress situations. And then, after a decade or so, they're like, I can't do it, like physically.
Yeah,
like,
the body won't.
Like, it's not good for me. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. You need a nap in the middle of the day.
Yeah, how many of these offices are offering siesta?
Well, I do know that Google had pods for a while.
Yeah, they had nap rooms,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, which I was a
I've been in a
huge
couple of
fan of.
companies that have
Yeah,
that.
I was like, that's one thing when I built my super gym. I had a little pod area with, different lights and sounds and smells, and you could just go in there and completely disappear. So I actually took my napping, which used to just be anywhere, and I kind of enhanced it so I could get even more out of my nap time.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's find what works and
Yeah.
optimize it, and
Yeah.
yeah, increase that base level. Let's talk about nature and how that's played into your life. Is that something you always had a connection to, or did that come later on?
Well, I grew up in nature. Like I grew up in a small. My first memories were like in a small rural town in Northern California,
Mm.
and mom was a single mom, so we didn't, and we lived in an apartment, so the days weren't spent inside. We got up in the morning and we left, and we were gone all day, and we just explored and ran around, and that has really shaped my desire to be outside. I like to be inside if I'm resting. That's like it.
Mm-hmm.
But anything else, I like to be outside. And then when I first retired, I'd kind of lost a lot of my, not that I lost my love of nature, but I lost my time in nature
Mm.
when I was training all the time. Because it's not, unless you go hiking on the weekend, you just train all day and sleep, you're focusing on the machine. So when I first retired and I moved out here into the valley, you know, it was the first time I had all this time to just be in nature. And so I would get up, take my daughter to school, preschool, whatever it was, and I would go spend 6, 7, 8 hours in nature. Bring water, a little food, and just hike everywhere and walk around. And, yeah, and it was fantastic. And what I realized in hindsight was I put my mind under tremendous stress, accomplishing my tasks and my goals. And then I put my body under tremendous stress. I did a lot of damage to it. And so, what I was really looking to do was heal my body. And I knew, hiking at a small incline feels great on my knees, my hips, my back, my twisted back always feels better when I'm at that slight incline. And so, yeah, it was very healing to me. When we look at the studies on just being in nature and what it does to calm you and what it does to your energy, I think there's something really valuable there and something I really rely on. I'm out, 5, 6, 7 days a week doing something in nature.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and especially as an entrepreneur, but even, if you're working in the regular world, I mean, we have the ability to design our days that we can incorporate some of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have a meeting, you can make it outdoors, even if it's just taking a walk. Like I think those little things. I mean, I lived and worked in New York City for 20 years, and any contact to nature, it would just lower that stress level.
Mm-hmm.
And even if just for a short period, get me out of that fight or flight state. So many of us are in that fight or flight state for so much of the day and don't even realize it. And I think once we get into nature where we just feel that calm,
Yeah.
that's when we can't necessarily define it, but things just feel better, things start working better, the body has the ability to then start to heal. I mean, without that, when it's in fight or flight, it's not healing anything.
Yeah. Yeah, and especially for kids, there's something really valuable about putting kids in nature and putting them into that environment, just both from learning and observing and seeing the connection with the earth, but also just not having extraneous energies and TVs and all this stuff that
Yeah, what's your approach there been with parenting? I'm always curious about
for
that.
like TV and stuff.
Screens and all of that.
My daughter got a phone when she was 11, and it was really a build up. We really communicated to her like what the phone is for. So we can contact you. So you can, it's really about a tool for communication. Once she hit 12, it was TikTok and all these other things, and we kind of let her do that, but then we pulled it all back because it became a distraction. And I was like, hey, you're feeling differently because of this. You're, not taking care of responsibilities and stuff. So, we tried to tiptoe in and be, good educators on sort of the tool that it's supposed to be. And I think we've done a good job with that. On the TV thing, like, we're not big TV people, but we're big movie people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we like the movie experience. So we, we'll sit down and watch a movie. If everything's done and, the evening's done, like, we'll watch a movie.
It's the storytelling thing again, right?
Yeah, it's because it really is. And we're very conscious of the content, right? So, when you're in the Disney ages, everything is, Disney. But once you hit about, 8 or 9 or so like that, it's all kind of formed, and then they're processing, these deeper stories. And so we're very conscious on, the right content and then good stories for telling, like things that, make her think. One of the biggest ones I think was actually a cartoon of the story about a girl that did ballet, but it was just this great story. She took another girl's place to be in the ballet, and she assumed her identity. So there's this kind of slight deceit to achieve your dream. So there's like really interesting layers to the story. And then she meets a mean teacher, and and then she meets a kind one, and so it has all these different characters. And what she got out of it was fantastic. She's like, Dad, I think I could be a ballerina if I really committed myself to it. And I was like, totally. She's like, but I probably shouldn't lie or do anything like that. I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna want. Didn't work out for that girl. So like the basis of the story was really good, and I just think if you're conscious of that as a parent, and most films do a good job, in the age groups of providing that information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think generally there's been
they're pretty good at it.
Shift.
But I'm like the big this is one of my parent conversations, like, what are you guys watching? Because I want to know, like, is there other stuff out there? Is there good stories?
Yeah, it's going to fuel us one way or another, right?
And she's getting older, so like, she's no longer interested in being a ballerina. She wants to be a guitarist and a singer and like all these different things. So I'm always looking for stuff that has good storytelling and good morals and a good arc for her to kind of go on the journey.
Yeah, and matches in which you might want to do. I mean, when you said that, I remembered, like, I once watched, like, one of the Mission Impossible movies. Oh, yeah. And I came out of it like I could be a spy, right? I mean,
I'm
like...
so down.
So it's like, yeah, okay. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and that's where, like, curation comes into play.
Yeah. Well, when I met with my friend in the Bay Area, and we have a mutual friend who's running, like, Nickelodeon. Mm-hmm. And so my daughter wants to be an actress. I want to be an actress, Dad. I'm like, okay. But she doesn't want to do the work. Right? So I'm like, okay, well, like, I'm an actor, and it's like a lot of work. You got to memorize the lines. You got to do da-da-da. She's like, yeah, I just want to be an actress. And so I'm talking to my buddy Scott, and he's like, well, he runs Nickelodeon. And I'm like, yeah, but she doesn't want to do the work. And he's like, okay, but maybe this is a chance for you guys to all have lunch, and for him to say, well, there's work to be done, like, for him to deliver the message. And then she might hear it. I was like, oh, that's actually a great idea.
Did you guys play it out?
Because I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, do you want to have lunch? Because she's, my daughter's super talented and, outgoing, and she is a great actress, but she hasn't committed to the discipline of the craft. Mm-hmm. And, when Dad says it, because it looks easy when Dad does it, and I've been doing it for so long. So when Dad says it, it just doesn't have the value, it doesn't have the merit. So,
and who knows, maybe she's going to be a natural, just like she was with introducing herself to people and picking it up from watching you.
But it's still like, and this is what I tell entrepreneurs, there's always work. Yeah. Like, it's never easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't make money.
Well, and it goes to, was it plus, neutral, negative?
Plus equals minus.
Plus equals minus. I mean, that's it, right? Like, do you want to get to this flat point, or do you always want to be striving up to next level? Yeah,
because if you don't, somebody will. And eventually your position will be lost, and but there's always work to be done. It doesn't, even if it comes easy, there's always work to be done, because it'll come easy for somebody else, and they'll do more work. And then you'll be second, or you'll be third, or you won't get a call
Let them
back.
Drive you, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing I'm trying to find the lesson that instills that, and that's like,
It's crazy being a parent, trying to
it's wild,
find
right?
things to pass
and I think, the way our society is built up, we don't have this generational passing of knowledge. We don't have elders. Yeah. They're not the leaders of the community. It's different. And, in older societies, my daughter would be learning, from a great great grandmother who would be telling these, time honored stories that, helped enforce the culture and what was going on. And because we've lost that, it really falls onto the parent. And, if you're working hard, if you're struggling, if you're extra busy, if you don't have yourself together, guiding another human being to be better or different or, break cycles or just be great, it's a real challenge. And it's a lot of work. And I think, that's why I tell people, listen, if you don't want to have kids, don't have them. Like, just pass right over it, because it's a 20-year minimum educational commitment.
24/7.
A ton of care, 24/7, and then you get a little bit of time off before, the next generation comes. But it's a serious commitment, and it's one that, I'm always telling, dads, like, your son or your daughter is going to do everything you do, every movement you make, every word you say, like, they're all going to do it. So take a moment, and then when you're in that leadership position, and be like, is this what I want my children to become? If you're like, I used to be an angry person, I used to have all this emotional anger and frustration. And
how'd you deal with that?
Martial arts, I'd work it out. I'd go, that's why I encourage youth sports. I got involved using my body, exercising some of that energy. And then what develops from it is a great purpose and a community. And then they're there to be like, hey, that's not cool. Or, hey, you doing all right? They become your group. And before, I never had a group. So, that's why I was so angry. Like, it was just me, and I was just trying to survive, and, it felt unfair. But yeah, it's, I used to be really angry, frustrated, but that's why I, did so much crime as well. It seemed like a game. It seemed fun. And then I knew it was wrong. So it was a way for me to express myself, to get out. I was like, oh, screw that. I'm doing this.
And you mentioned that meditation has been a part of your practice too. How'd that come into the picture, and has that helped?
Yeah. Well, it started just purely as an organic need. I was fighting people, and it was terrifying. Going back to being a child, like, the things that happen to you as a child mold how you think, you feel, how your emotional system reacts, like how your entire system responds to stimuli. And, because of the abuse and things that happened to me, that kind of stimuli would overwhelm my body. Like, my amygdala would go crazy. My body would be like, whoa, and just flood it. And so I would be unable to control my emotions. I would literally freak out. And then, that's just a terrible, system to have when you're trying to be a fighter, when you have to face these contests, when you have to travel to foreign countries and do all these things. And so I realized it was taking away from my sleep and my ability to heal, because I had so much anxiety. And so I'm looking for ways to deal with it. And I found meditation. I used to visualize before, because, through the bodybuilding and through, through understanding the body, and the mechanics of the body, I would begin to visualize, it working and growing, and, how to develop. And so that's how visualization started. It was through really bodybuilding. But the meditation started because I had these stressors that were so powerful. And I could tell when I didn't deal with them and I tried to perform that I wasn't optimal. Like, I couldn't focus, I made bad decisions, I would get tired quicker. But once I started a process of dealing with them through meditation, then I was able to, calm them to a point where they didn't overpower me. And then from that point, I just kept developing, and I kept using it as a tool, because I realized, gosh, it calmed me when I did speaking, and it calmed me when I did teaching, and it calmed me when I did all these other things. So I just began to use it as kind of a calming, focusing tool. And, now I use it for anything. Like, if I have something and I can't figure it out, I look at it as almost like a defrag or a mind dump. I go in and I just get rid of everything. And then I'm just able to see things clearer. I'm able to understand things better. I'm able to get rid of the noise that's in the way of trying to figure something out.
Well, Frank, thanks so much for joining me today. This was a blast, and hope we could do it again in the future.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Roll up anytime.
Awesome. Yeah, we're here today in the RV. Thanks for joining us this week on Growth Guide. A big thanks to our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Project New You. I'm a huge fan of their Nitrovite nootropic brain supplement. It's helped me to develop laser focus, a better memory recall, and motivation. Nitrovite has helped me in launching this podcast amongst completing many other projects. Visit growthguide.love/focus to learn more and use promo code GROWTH for 15% off. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Atmananda Yoga. You guys have got to check out their yoga alignment mat. I've been using this for a long time. As you know by now, I've studied and trained with them as a yoga teacher, and the mat is incredible to deepen your practice and to ensure a lifelong injury-free practice. Visit growthguide.love/alignment for more info or to buy. Be sure to use code GROWTH at checkout for 15% off. Make sure to visit our website, growthguide.love, where you can find freebies, exclusive content, and subscribe to the show so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in listening, I'd really appreciate a rating on iTunes. I can't tell you just how important this is. Or spread the love. Tell your friends, your fam, heck, tell your spirit animals. And follow me on Instagram at growthguide.love. Be sure to tune in next week for our newest episode.